The moment I saw my husband's dirty underwear sitting on another woman's desk, I knew the last piece of my marriage had finally died. I didn't scream, didn't gasp, didn't even blink, really. I just stood there in the doorway of that quiet office, still holding the paper bag I'd carried in like some dutiful, obedient wife delivering her husband's forgotten lunch. The room was cold, one of those over-air-conditioned spaces where the hum of the unit fills the silence, like a low, tired sigh. His secretary, Paula, sat frozen at her desk, her hand hovering midair over her keyboard. She wasn't wearing anything scandalous, just a plain navy blouse and glasses pushed up too high on her nose. She looked almost innocent, until you realized what she was guilty of. My husband's underwear, the ones I had washed, folded, and placed in the top drawer of our shared dresser, lay in a wrinkled pile right in front of her. It wasn't the underwear themselves that broke me, no. It was the way she looked at them, not disgusted, not confused, but territorial, as if she had a claim, as if she had earned them. I don't remember placing the bag on the desk. I don't remember breathing, I just remember the quiet thud of wood against wood when I finally set it down. "I came to drop off Mark's lunch," I said, my voice steady like it had been ironed flat. Paula swallowed. I could hear it, a thick, guilty sound that echoed in that cold little room. "Oh, Mrs. Daniels," she stammered. He's in a meeting." I nodded, eyes still on that pathetic little pile of cotton and betrayal. The clock on the wall ticked 3 times, 4, 5, and something in me shifted, as if a long, painful chapter had finally reached its last page. But that moment, as sharp and as brutal as it was, wasn't the beginning. No, the beginning was softer, quieter, the kind of tiny crack you don't see until the whole thing snaps in two. Before all this, before the underwear, before the whispered phone calls and the lies dressed up as late nights at the office, Mark and I were just ordinary. Ordinary in that steady, comforting way you don't question. Ordinary in that way you almost take for granted. We'd been married 12 years. Lived in a modest brick house with a squeaky screen door he kept promising to fix. I worked from home as a freelance bookkeeper. Mark worked downtown at a mid-sized architecture firm. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just a life built one grocery run, one Sunday morning coffee, one inside joke at a time. And I loved that life. Every morning I woke up around 6. The smell of the coffee pot struggling to life. The soft whir that always reminded me it was older than it should be. I'd toast him 2 slices of bread. I always had to burn one a little because that's how he liked, the edges. Crisp, but not charred. He'd walk into the kitchen rubbing his eyes, hair sticking up at odd angles. "You spoil me," he'd mumble. I'd laugh. Someone's got to. There was a warmth between us, or at least I thought there was, that felt lived in, broken in like a favorite sweater. Nothing dramatic, nothing fiery, but steady. Safe. His mother adored me. My sister teased me about being the sensible one. Our neighbors joked we were the couple that still holds hands in the grocery store, though half the time he was just pulling me toward the ice cream aisle because he had no impulse control. And me? I believed in us. In him. In the house we were building, not brick by brick, but moment by moment. I remember one evening particularly well, the kind of evening that seems meaningless at the time but feels significant in hindsight. It was late summer, warm enough that the cicadas were still humming loudly outside. I was chopping tomatoes for dinner when Mark came up behind me and kissed the back of my neck. "What was that for?" I asked, smiling. "For being you. Those are the things that make a person trust. Those are the things that make betrayal possible. A marriage doesn't collapse in a single day. It's a slow erosion, tiny pieces falling away while you're too busy living life to notice. And back then, I noticed nothing. Paula had just been the new secretary, a quiet woman with neat handwriting and a reputation for being efficient. She was polite to me at office parties, always offering a tight smile and a compliment that felt rehearsed. I didn't think twice. Why would I? People tell you to watch for red flags, but the truth is, it's hard to notice red against a sky already painted with sunsets you trust. That was before the distance, before the late nights, before he started smelling like cologne he didn't own. But that's part 2. For now, all I had was the memory of a life that felt whole. Before I found a piece of my husband on another woman's desk, a piece he shouldn't have given away. If I'm being honest with myself, truly honest, The first sign didn't come from a lipstick stain or a whispered phone call. It came from silence. Not the peaceful kind you share with someone you love. Not the comfortable quiet that settles between two people who know each other so well they don't have to fill every moment with words. No. This was a different kind of silence, a hollow one. A silence that took something instead of giving something. It started one Tuesday evening. Mark came home later than usual. Not late enough to raise an alarm, but late enough that I paused while stirring the pot of chicken stew on the stove. He slipped through the door quietly, almost too quietly. His usual routine was to come in with a half-exhausted sigh, dropping his keys in the ceramic bowl I kept by the entrance, muttering something about traffic or deadlines. But that day, his movements were soft, controlled, like he was trying not to disturb something delicate. "Long day?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Yeah," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. He kissed my cheek, but it was quick, a peck that landed on air more than skin, and he smelled faintly of citrusy cologne. Mark never wore cologne on weekdays. I noticed, not fully, but in that way your mind files something away without asking you about it. We ate dinner quietly. He pushed the stew around with his spoon, his eyes somewhere else, somewhere far away. I watched him tap his thumb against the table. He had always done that when he was distracted, but this felt like a different kind of distraction. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Everyone had off days. Everyone had heavy workloads. When he went upstairs to shower, I stayed in the kitchen longer than usual, wiping down a counter that didn't need wiping. Something in me felt unsettled, but I didn't know what to do with it yet. 2 days later, another small shift. I was folding laundry, our laundry, when I noticed 2 pairs of his underwear missing. I didn't panic or think anything dramatic. My first thought was that he'd left some in his gym bag again. When I asked him, he blinked, a beat too long. "Probably at the office," he said casually, waving it off. "The office?" I laughed. "And how exactly do your underwear end up at the office?" He didn't laugh with me. "It happens," he muttered, grabbing his briefcase. "I gotta go." I stared after him as the front door shut. My fingers tightened around the soft cotton shirt I'd been folding. Something felt off. But the rational part of my mind, the part trained to trust, smoothed the wrinkle immediately. He's just stressed, he's just tired, he's just distracted. It's nothing. That's how suspicion works, you know. It doesn't slam into your life like a storm. It drips in slowly, a leak you keep telling yourself you'll fix later. A week passed with more little signs. He started showering as soon as he came home, barely saying hello. Some nights he worked late, not every night, not even most nights, just enough to stir a quiet unease in my chest. One evening I went to bring his suit jacket to the dry cleaners. As I lifted it off the hook, a faint scent clung to it, something floral and sweet, something that definitely wasn't mine. I checked the pockets like I always did, expecting receipts or gum wrappers. Instead, I found a folded note. Just 3 words, "Sorry about earlier." No name, no signature, just that careful handwriting. My stomach tightened, my throat felt dry. I put the note on the counter and stared at it as if it might speak more truth if I glared long enough. Part of me whispered, "It's probably nothing." Another part whispered, "Don't you dare lie to yourself." But denial is a powerful sedative. When Mark walked in that night, I didn't confront him. The note was still sitting on the kitchen counter, but I slid it under a magazine before he saw it. We ate dinner like normal. We talked about nothing, weather, work, the broken toaster. He kissed my forehead before bed, and I lay beside him in the dark, listening to the sound of his breathing, steady, even, while my own chest felt tight. The real shift happened the following Monday. He asked me casually if I could drop off the lunch he'd forgotten. He never forgot lunch. Mark was particular about his routines. But more than the forgetfulness, it was the way he asked, hurried, almost nervous, like the request itself was a test. "Sure," I said, trying to sound breezy. I packed the lunch I'd prepared that morning. Chicken salad, the apple he liked, a small note I sometimes put in his meals just to make him smile. I placed everything neatly into the brown paper bag, but when I lifted his briefcase to put it by the door, ready for him to grab in the morning, something caught my eye. A small tear along the seam, barely noticeable, but tucked inside the rip was a piece of fabric sticking out. I pulled it gently. It was a piece of lace. Black lace. I just stood there with the fabric between my fingers, the kitchen suddenly too quiet. It felt like a moment where reality split in two, the life I thought I had and the one I might actually be living. I placed the lace on the counter next to the folded note I'd kept hidden for days. Side by side, they looked like the beginning of a story I didn't want to read. Still, when morning came, I grabbed his lunch bag, straightened my hair, put on lip gloss, and told myself I was just being paranoid. That's how deeply we try to protect the stories we've built, the stories we want to believe. But when I walked into his office that afternoon, I found something I could no longer ignore, because nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for the sight of your husband's underwear on another woman's desk. Not hints, not notes, not intuition, nothing. And part of me knew life was about to split open completely. Most people think that discovering an affair feels like a lightning strike, sudden, catastrophic, impossible to ignore. But for me, it felt quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your heartbeat sound like footsteps in an empty hallway. When I stepped into Mark's office building that afternoon, the receptionist gave me a polite smile, the kind meant for visitors who don't belong. She pointed me toward the third floor, where administrative staff and mid-level managers worked. I'd been there before. I knew the layout, I knew where Mark's office was, and I knew exactly where Paula sat, right in front of his door, guarding it like some ever-faithful sentinel. But that day, when I reached the top of the stairs, I noticed something different: laughter. A soft, intimate laugh drifting down the hallway from behind Mark's closed office door. A laugh I didn't recognize, a laugh that didn't belong to anyone who thought they were being watched. My fingers tightened around the paper lunch bag. I took a slow breath, as if the air itself might steady me. "Just drop off lunch," I whispered to myself. "That's all you came for." I walked toward Paula's desk. She didn't hear me at first. She was typing quickly, eyes glued to her screen. Her navy blouse looked freshly pressed, her hair pinned neatly back. She looked polished, more polished than the Paula I'd met months ago. Then, as I stepped closer, I saw it. A familiar hint of color. A small, wrinkled pile of fabric sitting right beside her keyboard. White cotton, faded blue waistband. Mark's underwear. The exact brand and style he bought in bulk every December. The same ones I'd washed 2 days ago, folded neatly and placed in his drawer. My breath caught, sharp and painful. I stopped walking. My body felt heavy, like a weight had settled across my shoulders. My vision tunneled, but not in that dramatic, spinning way you see in movies. It was slower, a narrowing of reality, like the world was trying to shield me from the full picture. Paula finally looked up. Her hands froze above the keyboard. Her face went pale. "Oh, Mrs. Daniels," she said, her voice tripping over the words. "Can I help you?" I didn't answer her. I couldn't. Instead, I slowly set the paper lunch bag down on the corner of her desk. The thud of it landing felt louder than it should have. I looked at the underwear again. Dirty, wrinkled, freshly used. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. There's a moment, a strange suspended moment, when betrayal becomes undeniable. It's not anger. Not yet. And not sadness either. It's something closer to shock, but quieter. Like your mind hasn't caught up with what your eyes have already accepted. Finally, I found my voice. "Are those my husband's?" Soft, even, too calm. Paula blinked rapidly. He changed earlier and..." Her voice cracked like thin glass. The laughter behind Mark's office door stopped abruptly. Then silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. A second later, the handle turned. The door opened, and there he was. Mark, my husband. Hair slightly mussed, shirt wrinkled in a way that didn't come from sitting at a desk. His tie loosened, his face flushed. He stopped when he saw me. "Claire?" Just my name, barely more than a breath. And in that moment, seeing him framed in that doorway, guilty, startled, exposed, something inside me went still. Not shattered, not broken, just still. I stepped back, needing space, needing air. "Lunch," I said, nodding toward the bag. "You forgot it." His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked from me to Paula, then to the underwear on her desk. His expression collapsed. Guilt, panic, shame, all tangled together. "Claire, please, let me explain." "Explain?" My voice was quiet, almost gentle. like I was talking to a stranger. Paula stood abruptly. "Mrs. Daniels, it's not what you think." I turned my head slowly toward her. "Please don't insult me like that." She closed her mouth. Mark took a step forward. "Let's go somewhere private, please." I shook my head. "We're not doing this in private, Mark. Not anymore." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd known for 12 years, but this time it felt unfamiliar, like I was watching a man I'd never met. "How long?" I asked quietly. His eyes darted to the floor. "Claire, how long?" A few seconds of silence stretched between us. Then, barely audible, 6 months. 6 months, half a year of lies, half a year of whispered meetings, half a year of sharing pieces of himself he never offered me. I felt the air leave my lungs in a slow, trembling breath. But I didn't cry. Not then. 12 years, Mark, I whispered. And this is what you did with the last 6 months of them. He closed his eyes as if the words hurt him. Paula reached for a tissue, but her hands were shaking. She dabbed her eyes as though she were the victim. I stared at her, then at him, then back at the underwear. My voice came out steady, too steady for the way my heart was pounding. "You left these at her house? Or did you change in her car, her office? Which one was it?" He flinched. "Good. Let the truth sting." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Claire." I nodded slowly. "Okay. Just that. One word, Mark." Looked confused. Nearly relieved, even. "Okay?" "Yes," I said softly. "Okay." Because I understood something in that moment. I might still have been standing there, but I was no longer his wife. Not in any way that mattered. I reached forward and picked up the underwear, my fingers brushing the soft, worn cotton. Paula gasped quietly as I gathered the pile and looked her straight in the eyes. "You should keep these," I said calmly. "They're yours now." She stared at me, horrified, as I placed them neatly back onto her desk, not tossed, not thrown, but set down with dignity. The dignity they lacked, the dignity I intended to keep. Then I walked away, out of the office, down the hallway, out into the sunlight of a world that suddenly felt sharper, harsher, but mine again. And behind me, I heard Mark's voice, broken, calling my name. I didn't turn around. Not yet, because this was only the beginning of what came next. I thought I would. That the moment I sat down behind the wheel, everything would collapse in on me, that I'd grab the steering wheel and scream or sob or fall apart the way people do in movies. But I didn't. The seatbelt clicked into place and I just sat there, hands resting in my lap, eyes staring at nothing. It was like my mind had gone into some quiet, controlled shutdown, preserving the last bit of stability I had left. After a few minutes, I started the engine and drove home on autopilot. The world outside my window looked normal. Cars passing, people chatting on sidewalks, a woman pushing a stroller while sipping iced coffee. Ordinary life continued, completely unaware that mine had just been split in two. When I reached our house, the one with the squeaky screen door and the flower pots I watered every morning, I walked inside slowly, as if stepping into someone else's life. The living room looked the same, the couch cushions plumped, the way I left them. The faint scent of lemon cleaner from the morning's tidying still clung to the air. Everything looked normal, and that somehow made it worse. I put my house keys on the little entrance table and noticed for the first time how heavy they felt. I moved into the kitchen, set my purse down and leaned against the counter, feeling the cool granite press into my palms. That's when the tears finally came. Not dramatic sobs, no heaving or gasping, just quiet tears rolling steadily down my cheeks, the kind you barely feel, the kind that come from a heartbreak too deep to be loud. I slid down to the floor, knees pulled to my chest, and let myself feel it. The humiliation, the betrayal, the grief for the life I thought I had. After what felt like an hour, I wiped my face, washed my hands, and looked at the reflection in the microwave door. I looked tired, older, but something in my eyes, something had hardened. A woman can break, but she can also sharpen, and I was sharpening. Mark came home an hour later. I heard his car pull into the driveway, the familiar slam of the door, his hurried footsteps on the walkway. My heart didn't race, it didn't flutter, it didn't even ache, it just steadied. The front door opened. "Claire?" His voice cracked. "Claire, please, can we talk?" I stayed seated at the dining table, hands folded neatly in front of me. When he walked in, he froze at the sight of me. I could see relief flicker across his face, as if he'd feared I'd be gone. "We need to talk," he said, voice low. "Yes," I replied calmly, "we do." He sat across from me, but he didn't meet my eyes. That was new. Mark had always been confident, too confident sometimes. But now he looked smaller, like a man who'd been caught in a storm of his own making. "Claire, I'm sorry," he began. "Don't," I said gently. "Not yet," he swallowed. Hard. I took a slow breath. "I need to understand something. Not to forgive you, not to fix anything. I just need to understand." He nodded nervously. "Okay, why her?" He let out a shaky exhale, rubbing his temples. "It wasn't about her specifically. It just happened. People don't fall into affairs the way they fall into puddles," I said quietly. "Something led you there." He looked pained. I was stressed. Work was overwhelming. "You seem distant," that struck me. "Distant?" My voice was soft but sharp. "Mark, I was working from home, taking care of everything. I asked you every day how you were. You shut me out. So don't twist this into me neglecting you." His face crumpled. I know. I'm not blaming you, I'm just trying to explain. How I messed up." "You didn't mess up," I corrected. "You made choices." Silence settled between us. He wiped a hand over his face. "I ended it with her last week." My stomach tightened. I hadn't expected that. "Then why was she still wearing your underwear on her desk?" I asked, calm as ever. He flinched. "I don't know. She's been emotional since I told her. Maybe she thought you'd come back to her," I finished. He looked down at the table. I realized then that the affair wasn't just physical. There had been promises, implications, maybe even whispers of a future he never intended to give her. That made me feel even more sick. I leaned back slightly. Heat rose behind my eyes, but I held it together. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked finally. He looked up, eyes glossy. I want you, Claire. I want our marriage. I want to fix this." I studied him, the trembling hands, the desperation, the guilt eating at him like acid. "Then why did you risk losing me?" A whisper, a wound. He opened his mouth, but no words came. None that could matter, none that could undo what had been done. I stood up. "I'm not making any decisions today," I said softly. "I need space, I need clarity, and I need time." He nodded, choking out anything, "Whatever you need." "Good," I said, turning away. "Because tonight you're sleeping in the guest room." He deflated visibly. "Okay." I walked down the hallway toward our bedroom, feeling the weight of each step. At the doorway, I paused. "Mark?" He looked up. "I'm not the woman who will scream and throw things," I said quietly. "But I am the woman who will not let you make me small." He nodded, shamefully, almost gratefully. I closed the bedroom door behind me. Inside, alone in the quiet, I realized something important. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't planning forgiveness either. I was planning clarity, and clarity can be a sharp blade. I sat on the bed, breathing deeply, feeling the truth settle around me like dust in sunlight. I didn't know the future yet, whether I'd stay or leave, whether our marriage could survive this fracture. But I knew one thing: I wasn't done, not by a long shot, because tomorrow, the world would know what he had done, not by my hand, but by the weight of his own actions. And I would be there, watching quietly, with the strength of a woman who finally sees everything clearly. The next morning, the sun came in soft through the curtains, but nothing about the day felt gentle. I woke up before my alarm, before the birds even. My eyes snapped open with that strange clarity you only get after a night of emotional exhaustion. I didn't feel rested, but I did feel resolved. Mark had already left for work. I could tell by the empty spot in the driveway and the faint scent of his aftershave hanging in the hallway. I wondered if he'd slept at all. I made myself coffee, though it tasted bitter even with the sugar. I moved slowly through the house, touching surfaces, noticing details I'd overlooked for years. The scuff on the wall near the hallway from when we moved in. The loose knob on the cabinet I'd meant to fix. The picture frame of us laughing on vacation. A younger version of me leaning into a man I thought I knew. Everything felt like it belonged to someone else. After a long, quiet breakfast, I finally grabbed my keys. I wasn't going to confront anyone. I wasn't going to make a scene. But the truth? The truth was already unraveling on its own. When I arrived at the architecture firm, things were different. People were whispering near the elevators. A pair of interns exchanged uneasy glances as I walked past. The receptionist, a woman named Lacey, stiffened when she saw me. Her eyes widened in that awkward, sympathetic way that made my stomach twist. "Good morning, Mrs. Daniels," she said gently. "Good morning, Lacey," I replied, calm and polite. "Is Mark in his office?" Yes," she said carefully. "He's with someone." I nodded once. I figured. She hesitated. "Just so you know, something happened this morning." My heart tensed. "What happened?" She pressed her lips together. "It's not really my place to—" "Lacey," I said softly. "I already know about the affair." Her shoulders dropped in relief, as if carrying a weight she didn't want. "Paula came in crying," she admitted. "She made a scene. Of course she did." "Thank you," I said. "I'll handle it." I walked down the hallway, each step steady, a quiet reminder that I was still in control of myself, even if everything else had fallen apart. When I reached the administrative area, several heads turned. People looked away quickly, pretending to type or shuffle papers, but I felt their eyes. Everyone knew, or at least, they knew something. I'd suspected this moment would come. Affairs never stay private, not in offices, not in communities. People sense things. They talk, they speculate, they whisper. But I hadn't expected it to happen today. I stopped in front of Mark's office door. I didn't knock. I opened it. Mark was standing behind his desk, red-eyed and tense. Paula was seated in the guest chair, clutching a tissue, makeup smudged beneath her glasses. Her shoulders were hunched, her leg bouncing nervously. Both of them froze when they saw me. "Claire," Mark breathed, stepping forward. "What are you doing here?" I closed the door behind me quietly. "I came," I said calmly, "to give you both a chance to finish whatever this is." Paula's face crumpled. "Mrs. Daniels, I'm so sorry." "Stop," I said gently. Not cruelly, not harshly, just firmly. "You don't owe me an apology you don't mean." She blinked rapidly. Tears welled again. I turned to Mark. "You didn't warn her, did you?" He blinked. "Warn her? That you ended things with her?" I said plainly. "That I found out. That there will be consequences." Paula looked at him sharply. "You ended it? For her?" Mark winced. "Paula, Enough," I said, "both of you." They went silent. I stepped forward, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not here to yell. I'm not here to insult anyone, but I am here to tell the truth. And you two need to hear it." Paula wiped her cheek shakily. "You believed he'd leave me," I said simply. "Didn't you?" Her breath hitched. "He said he was unhappy. He said you were growing apart. He said—" I held up a hand. "No need to repeat it. I know the script." Her lips trembled as she looked down. I continued, voice calm but unyielding. "And you, Mark, you fed her that script, because it made you feel justified." He opened his mouth but nothing came out. I looked between the two of them. "You both stepped into something you had no business creating, and you tangled yourselves in lies you couldn't maintain. Now you're living the consequence." Paula sniffed. "People are talking. Everyone saw me crying this morning." She sounded embarrassed. "Not guilty." "Yes," I said softly. "That's what happens when you mix personal and professional choices." Mark closed his eyes, face tight with shame. "I'm not here to destroy anyone's career," I said. But the truth needed to happen out loud. Paula whispered, "I'm going to HR." "That's your decision," I said. "But understand this, I'm not blaming you alone." "He made vows. You didn't." Mark flinched as if struck. I looked at him. "You broke something that cannot be unbroken." His voice cracked. "Claire, please, don't do this here." "You did this here," I replied quietly. "I'm just finishing the conversation." Paula shifted uncomfortably. I let out a long breath. "This ends now, completely. Whatever scraps of whatever you two thought you had, it ends. Today." Paula nodded weakly. Mark swallowed. "It ended before yesterday. I swear it." "Maybe," I said, "but that doesn't change what happened." I turned to leave, but before opening the door, I added softly, "I hope you both find whatever it is you were looking for, but it won't be each other. And it won't involve me." Then I opened the door, and this time, no one looked away. The entire administrative area had fallen into a strange hush, people pretending to work while trying to listen. Their gazes skittered away like startled birds when I walked past. Not one word was said, not one whisper. Because sometimes silence is the loudest judgment of all. When I stepped outside into the daylight, I breathed in deeply, the scent of warm concrete and the faint breeze brushing against my face. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free, not healed, not whole, but free. And that was the first step towards something new. Not the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. No, this was different, gentle, almost tender, the kind of quiet that invites reflection, a kind of quiet that demands you face yourself without distractions, without illusions, without pretending everything is fine when it isn't. I spent mornings sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight drape itself over the garden. The roses we planted together, the ones Mark had always teased me about tending too carefully, were blooming, red, fierce, determined. They made me smile. I started journaling again, the habit I'd abandoned during the busyness of marriage, work, and raising a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. I wrote about the betrayal, about the shock, about the moments when I thought I couldn't breathe, about the subtle victories I'd claimed for myself, the quiet dignity I'd held when confronting Paula, when telling Mark to leave the bedroom, when walking away from the office with my head held high. Writing reminded me that my voice still existed, that it mattered, that I still mattered. Mark came home one evening, weeks after the incident. He knocked lightly on the door of the guest room, his voice soft. "Claire, can we talk?" I didn't answer immediately. I sat on the porch instead, listening to the crickets, feeling the night air cool on my skin. He finally came around to the porch and sat quietly beside me, at a distance. I want to apologize again," he began. "I can't undo what I did, I know that. But I want to be honest, with you and with myself." I didn't look at him. I took a slow sip of the lukewarm coffee in my hands. The bitterness reminded me of everything I'd endured. "I've done a lot of thinking," I said finally, turning my head toward him. "And I've realized something. I don't owe you forgiveness just because you ask for it. I owe it to myself to heal." He nodded, understanding. The kind of understanding that comes after a person has hurt you deeply. The kind that doesn't make the pain disappear but acknowledges it exists. "I can give you time," he said softly. "I know I've lost trust, maybe forever. But I hope one day. Maybe you can see me differently." "I hope so too," I replied, though in a very different way than he imagined. But not because of us, because of me. I started setting boundaries. No more casual dinners with Mark, no more sharing the bed when it made me feel trapped in the past. No more pretending like nothing happened. I began exercising again, walking every morning in the crisp air, listening to the rustle of leaves and the distant laughter of neighbors. Small things, yes, but every small act of care for myself reminded me I was still whole, that I was more than a betrayal. I also rebuilt relationships I had neglected over the years. My sisters, my oldest friends, even my mother. I spoke about the affair only when necessary, choosing honesty over shame. Surprisingly, people were empathetic. They were shocked, yes, but they were not judgmental. Perhaps they understood something I had once known but had buried under daily life, that betrayal is not your fault. Even Paula reached out weeks later, hesitantly, asking if we could have a conversation. I agreed. We met at a small coffee shop. The first few minutes were awkward, filled with long pauses and hesitant words. She apologized again, this time with sincerity that I could feel. I was young, foolish. I didn't understand what I was doing," she said quietly. I nodded. "And now you do. That's the only thing that matters. We didn't become friends. That wasn't necessary. But we left that cafe with respect restored, my dignity intact. And sometimes that's enough." The most important part of healing was learning to reclaim joy. I joined a book club, took long hikes, tried painting again. I laughed at things that weren't funny in the first place, just to remind myself I could. I made space for new experiences, dinners alone, mornings with no schedule, quiet walks where I could think without guilt. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to feel lighter. I began to recognize that life does not end with betrayal. Life adapts. Life teaches you resilience. Life allows you to stand again, stronger and wiser than before. Mark and I never went back to the way things were. Not fully. We remained polite, respectful in our shared spaces, but the intimacy, the trust, it was gone. That was a truth I accepted finally, without bitterness. I learned that forgiveness is not always for the other person. Sometimes it's for yourself. And I also learned that dignity is not a gift we wait for others to give. It is something we claim, even in the darkest moments. The roses in my garden were still blooming. The sunlight still poured across the porch. And I, finally, was breathing freely again. I want to leave you with something I learned the hard way, and I hope you carry it with you, whether you've faced betrayal yourself or simply know someone who has. Life will sometimes hand you pain that feels unbearable. It will test your patience, your heart, and your trust. Sometimes the people you love most, the ones you thought would never hurt you, will fail you in ways you never imagined. That's reality. But here's the thing: how you respond defines the next chapter. You can collapse under it, or you can rise above it. You can let bitterness take root, or you can choose dignity, patience, and clarity. And yes, it takes time. It takes quiet mornings, long walks, and sometimes even tears in empty rooms. For me, claiming my dignity, even in small, deliberate acts, was the beginning of healing. Facing Mark and Paula, telling the truth quietly and firmly, walking away from their chaos without rage, and giving myself space to breathe. All of that restored something no one else could ever take from me: my self-respect. I share this not because I want anyone to imitate me or to judge anyone involved. I share it because we all deserve to see that the end of trust isn't necessarily the end of our lives. Betrayal can be a doorway to self-awareness, to growth, to new beginnings. So I ask you, if someone wronged you, could you find the strength to stand with dignity? Could you choose clarity over chaos? Could you protect your heart while letting life go on around you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more stories like mine. Stories that remind us life is messy, people are flawed, but strength, dignity, and hope are always within reach. Because at the end of the day, the only thing we can control is how we rise after the storm.